But I would argue people are hungrier, and I would love Daoud's input on this. I think people are hungrier for more brand activation, offline, community driven events by these brands more than they've ever been.
I
I've
would
seen
agree
it multiple times this year where a brand does a pop up or an activation and it sells out. In golf, like Malbon does this a lot. They took over basically like this bar, called it Hyperion House, and they did like special. They had like autograph sessions. They did a podcast at another at an adjacent property with two of their like biggest stars, and then they did a run. So they did like this group run, and I think it was hundreds of people that showed up for this thing. So
yeah.
for as much as we see the online impact, like again, I actually really like this. People are being challenged to think creatively about what their brand is, what it stands for, how they engage with people more than they've ever been. Just because we have more reach and we have more ways to target, let's really think about how we're targeting people and what does that really mean.
Yeah, totally right. If you're an online sports, seller, right? Like, freaking sponsor some little league teams in your region or something, right? Like, even though you're an e-commerce company, nothing's preventing you from, like you said, nothing's preventing you from finding people where they do their activities offline, right? Like, there's a ton of opportunity there. I think you're spot on with that. Like,
Yeah, I
that's
think
where people's
it's
attention is. Yeah.
yeah. I think as much time as we spend online, there are people who are hungry for a non-digital experience. Now,
100%.
whether they want to like then digitize that and like get a selfie and like, oh, look at, but that's part of it. But at least they're interacting. Like I think we're at an interesting place. Like I almost think we're at a threshold of like, is everything digital good for us? We know psychologically it's not. There's, enough data out there to support that.
Yeah.
So how as a brand are you going and engaging folks in the in IRL, I believe is the proper term.
Right.
Get ready to deep dive into the world of digital transformation, where we explore the latest trends, innovations, and challenges shaking up industries. Join us as we decode the secrets behind successful digital strategies and hear from experts who are at the forefront of disrupting the status quo. In each episode, we'll unravel the mysteries of the digital realm and uncover the hidden opportunities that lie within. From artificial intelligence to blockchain, from automation to cybersecurity, we'll leave no digital stone unturned. But hold on tight, because this podcast isn't your average tech talk. We're injecting a hefty dose of wit and humor into every episode, making learning about digital transformation an absolute blast. So if you're ready to embrace the digital revolution with a smile on your face, tune in to the Digital Disruption Podcast and get ready to be entertained, informed, and inspired. Don't miss out on the fun. Subscribe now and join us on this wild digital journey.
We are live. Hey, hello, gentlemen. How's everything?
Going well, Daoud. How are you doing, man?
I'm all good. Do you guys have Spotify?
I have the Spotify
Oh,
account.
yes, I do.
Wait, I'm the only one who's YouTube music guy? Oh, wow. I used to be Team Spotify and then I switched. I do like YouTube more, but credit is where credit due. Spotify has popularized the whole Wrapped kind of thing in the end of the year, and we love a good talk and we love some recaps on here. So we're gonna be doing our own recap for digital transformation and everything that is in between for 2024. So we have some good, bad, and ugly. Who wants to start?
Well, speaking of good, Daoud, man, you're looking sharp with the new hairdo and the really sharp duds. You got the man in black look going on with the collared shirt. You're
Showing just enough right here. I don't know. Is
say.
this like above board from like, are you allowed to comment on? I just want to make sure we're above board on this. You
Tell
look
me,
great,
Daoud, that you look
friend.
sharp and dapper today.
Looks great.
Yeah.
You know,
Good, my man.
spicing it up for the spicy episode today,
Nice. Nice. Well, I mean, I'm kind of fresh from the gym, and Sean there's got his little hoodie on as well. So I guess we're
Yeah,
kind
I
of
love his
we're
hat.
we're gonna have to step up our game next time.
Yeah, this is we'll give a shout out to the fine folks at Imperial Hats. Great brand, awesome rope hats. As you know, sometimes I'll throw in my favorite golf hats. This is Waste Management Classic. If you have not had the chance to go to a Waste Management Classic um, in February, it's an insane showing of some of our finest people in America just letting loose.
All
It is
right.
not as much a golf tournament as it is a giant party. So
Okay.
shout out to the fine folks there that facilitate such a gathering.
Nice. Love it. Love it. So what are we doing today, Daoud? It sounded like you were saying we're gonna do a wrap up or a recap or something.
Yeah, we want to do a Spotify, but not Spotify recap for all of the news that hit the digital marketing or like the digital scene lately, and we want to give the people a rundown of anything they've missed or remind them of the horrible things that happened, like the sunsetting of GA and the sunsetting of UA and moving to GA4, which I know people still like pissed off about this. So
Well, I want to start with one that's been on my mind lately because Sean and we've spent some time at more conferences and industry events this year, and I really have to say, um, this trend of shrinkflation, of sort of getting less for the same amount of money, is really taking consumers to the bank this year. And the most notable at conferences, I see a lot of young men, um, professionals, and they're wearing, suit pants, um, and dress slacks that are just, all the way midway up their calves. And, you know, the only thing I can attribute to is that now a CPG trend has now crept its way into the clothing and apparel vertical, and there's shrinkflation happening in men's suiting, and just quite frankly, men are getting less for the same amount of money, and their pants are just not long enough anymore. I'm seeing too much calf, too much ankle. Ankle socks with a suit is not a good look. So I'm really gonna say,
Patrick, I'm going to challenge this only that you may be seeing more ankle, but there's more fabric coming back. So we've lost the skinny trend. There's more fabric coming back up into the whole pant. So really the
okay.
it's probably the same,
So
probably the
it
same
nets
on
out.
material cost. It
Okay,
nets out. It's just
it
we've
nets out to the
removed.
same amount of material. Okay, so it's purely just bad fashion. Okay, well, let's
yeah,
You
move on to
know,
real. Let's move
fashion
on to
is
real.
cyclical.
Let's move on to real 2024 news. In that case, here I thought I was championing
A
young
return
male
to no
professionals.
ankles.
Yeah. Any, anyway,
You unfortunately we're not cool enough to influence that trend. I can tell you that
okay,
right now.
okay, cool. And also, no socks with dress shoes. Come on. Anyway,
It's what they say. It's a very European look.
it is. It is indeed. It is indeed.
Depending on where you're at, if you're near the equator, and it's a hot evening out, highly recommend it. You got some linen, rock it. If you're like
Yeah.
me, living in the middle of Seattle and it's November, I would say probably not the time to show off the ankles. But hey,
Yeah. Put some
I
socks
don't.
on.
I'm not a fashionista. Never
Put some
claimed to be.
socks on. Put some socks on. All right. All right, you mentioned one of the first big news items, and definitely, at least in our industry, data analytics, at least one of the areas we focus on. I mean, certainly Google Analytics for fully, coming of age, the deprecation and sunset of Universal Analytics, not just the data collection, but the data itself. So if you didn't back up your data, you weren't exporting it to BigQuery. I mean, you cannot access your legacy Universal Analytics data, anymore. And that's been the case since right around July 1st, shortly thereafter for some properties. But so it was a big seismic shift. Many companies ran GA4 in parallel for several years, or some even going back to when it was App Plus Web before it got renamed GA4, and were well prepared for the changeover. And some people really did Wait till the last possible minute to do the changeover. And honest, quite frankly, if you're still struggling how to get to your data in GA4, I mean, in terms of preparing for 2025, making sure your stakeholders have what they need. I mean, it's a great time to, as things may be slowing down through the end of the year, some GA4 training. There's a lot of
Some
good free
cleanup,
resources online, some cleanup. Yeah, exactly. Revisit that implementation possibly, but certainly if you don't have the expertise you feel you need in the platform by this point, and you're continuing to use the platform, boy, you really should get those skills tuned up for 2025 for sure. And I will say, some of the attribution issues have been resolved. The ability to directly report on GA4 data within like tools like Looker Studio, it's much better now than it was 6 months ago. You can actually build some pretty nice reports, directly in Looker Studio. It might be better to have the BigQuery export because it gives you more flexibility how you filter and query and segment the data.
But if you're a nimble team, it's going to suffice. And we love Looker. Just again, you can spin up some really impactful reports by leveraging that direct connection.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not, we talk about server side and banking some of that data and really starting to build a data warehouse, which, most brands probably should be thinking about doing in some capacity.
Yeah.
At this point, though, if you're still kind of walking before you run, getting that into Looker, and if you're the person who's the practitioner on some of that reporting, spend some time in there. It will make it more digestible. The interface, we've all had our issues with GA4. The interface has gotten better. There are some pieces, we talk about this a lot with clients, where you kind of have to get what you used to get, you have to take a few steps. Looker makes it a little bit easier. So I would say it's as valuable, if not more, knowing how to be a power user of Looker now versus being a power user of GA4 when it comes to actually pulling data and extracting.
Yeah, probably that's right. I would tend to agree with you. That's a big deal. And also, I mean, if you are going to use the GA4 interface, really familiarizing with the explore section, especially where you can do things a bit more ad hoc, create some funnels, it's more of a kind of data workbench, than a specific set of reports. So that's powerful.
I like that phrasing actually. Yeah, it's like if you're talking about your tool sets, right? Like it's really a workbench. It's like, okay, I can kind of put some stuff together here. I can get a quick export. I can glean some insights. But if I'm going to finish that project or I want something that I can hang on the wall, I'm probably going to need to take it into something else. I think that's a really good way to think about it.
And then the other thing I'm finding is I've been doing a bit more analysis and insights type work for clients the last few months and to close out the year. And just, I can't emphasize enough. There's a whole bunch of standard or what you would call like reserved events in GA4, especially around tracking e-commerce, but also relative to other industries. But do not reinvent the wheel. Like if you have an interaction on your website that is adding a product to your cart, then use the freaking add _to _cart event. Like use the standard events because it makes like GA4 inherently recognizes those as e-commerce events, and then you can also send other expected parameters with those events. You can more easily build funnels. If you're comparing two different brands that you may own or two different websites, you can much more easily run, comparable funnels. You can build things, but if you start like reinventing the wheel on things that are not bespoke, then it really starts to complicate your data model, like your data, sorry, not your data model, but your data schemas. Like there's really no reason to have taxonomies that are like
not
outside
intuitive.
The norm. Yeah, especially for for standard kind of events. Obviously custom events when you need them. I'm not believe me, custom events are really important and powerful. But don't use custom events when the standard event exists and suffices. Anyway, another Google news, of course. Well, we were all holding our breath and waiting for the cookie apocalypse. And I guess like many religious prophecies of the early to mid 19th century in the United States, the expected apocalypse never arrived. So we didn't, third-party cookie deprecation got delayed, did it not?
As an evangelical of the movement, I would like to come forth and say it will be coming. We got the date wrong. I mean, I say this half jokingly, but I think there's truth to that. Eventually, and again, maybe this was Google just trying to prepare everybody for like start getting creative on some of your tracking, be okay with some directional pieces, and like, you know, we were spoon fed a lot of data for a long time. I think this was actually the first podcast that I joined you guys on as well.
I think
And
that's right.
so
Yeah,
I'm
I think that's
having some
right.
flashbacks right now, less traumatic though than I thought.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good cautionary tale, like most Armageddon-like stories of preparedness and looking at data that exists that may not be firsthand or readily available. Yeah, it's a great correlation, like the day after tomorrow or whatever, right? Like, okay,
Yeah.
apocalypse movie, were the signs there? Yeah. So just start
Yeah.
thinking beyond what's available, what's easy. And guess what?
Yeah, I know for sure.
This is an opportunity in my mind for marketers to let's go back to some of the tactics that have worked that are timeless. We've had the fortunate experience to interview most recently, and this will be coming out shortly, but Tim Ash, who's a CRO expert. We've talked to some other friends in the industry on that front. I come from a lot of that background. Going back to the basic pieces of human psychology, consumer behaviors, leveraging like industry insight data and being able to benchmark against that, I think that's really important. And we forget it and we get siloed and we're like, well, our brand's doing X. Great. What did the industry see? If you're ahead of trend, that's a good sign. If you're flat against a downward trend, you're doing great. You're winning. You're actually up. Like, I think it's just going to force us to think a little bit more about some of these pieces in an offline manner. And
Yeah,
I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, no, some things are still true in 2024 that were true in 2023, right? It's like if an experience is broken on your website, fix it. If
you're frustrated, if you work for your company and you try to check out and you're frustrated by your checkout,
fix it.
And no amount of remarketing or retargeting is going to fix that. Yes. I abandoned the cart.
Exactly. Fix broken things. That has always, since there has been a digital landscape, fixing broken things has been a true mantra to live by. If you pick 5 or 6 people in your company to sit around a table and go through the website or your app, most of the broken things you'll just find them. So that still remains true in 2024. Headline, broken things frustrate users and make them not want to do business with you. Breaking news. That's CNN's newest breaking news. And by the way, Sean, I meant no offense, poking fun at religious prophecies. Of course, you know that. I was thinking most famously of the Millerites, though, who everything was supposed to come and they went up on their roofs. They sold off all their belongings and they sat up on their rooftops waiting for salvation. And of course, it didn't happen, or we would know a lot more about the Millerites today than we did. But yeah, anyhow.
Then I have a lot in common with them because I've been sitting on my rooftop waiting for the cookies to die out completely. I've been rattling my sword and it just hasn't come. I think there's a lot, shocker, right? A lot that we can, for students of history, nothing new around the sun.
That's right. Daoud, what do you think as a consumer, a little bit younger than Sean and I, what do you think about this cookie apocalypse thing? And I guess let's just call it what it is. Like the for 2 decades plus now, the sort of surreptitious surveillance of
anti-privacy
and internet users. Like what do you think these privacy and consent changes are a net good thing for consumers or indifferent, or what do you think? Do you think it's just a price for having all of this sort of democratized access to information and commerce and data? What do you think about that?
I mean, it's definitely a good thing for the customers. I feel like the deprecation of third-party cookie is just a step in in the direction of being more appealing to the younger generation, because if you look at what the younger generation buys through, you will not find that they buy through ads. I mean, the younger generation is way wary about ads and third party stuff. Like you see ad, you run like the plague, but you see a TikTok that's promoting some useless bullshit, you'll buy it at an instant, man, you know. So
But you don't consider that
companies,
an ad, right? Even if it's like
no,
it's a paid placement in that platform or like it's like
yeah,
reused, right? It was organic, and then they're like brands like we got to get this one on our reels. Like let's load it up into our ad buyer.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
That
interesting.
doesn't
Yeah.
sway you though, or
No,
that
no, no,
like
it doesn't feel like an ad.
Mm. That's
You always
interesting. And you're,
associate the ads with the old formats, the banners,
Mhm, mhm.
like Facebook, if anyone still uses Facebook, the Facebook ads and these kind of like legacy ads. But now even ads in, let's say, a podcast. I listen to podcasts a lot. I hear a lot of podcasts about like Bombas socks or Me Undies or whatever. I don't hate them. Like truly,
so you're
I
okay
mean
with
they're
a product placement like a live read or like because this is really we think about this right like that started back on radio 30s and 40s
Absolutely.
yeah.
right like welcome ladies and gentlemen brought to you by the fine people at Chevrolet have you bought it like it's kind of interesting how it's come full circle. I was actually listening to a podcast. I listened to Conan O'Brien's podcast,
Oh,
Love Team Coco, and they were talking about this kind of the other day of like that format, right? So late night TV again, another big advertising vehicle for a long time,
Totally. Yeah,
right?
totally.
Like we have airspace. What should we do? Let's put a talk show on there. Let's fill space. The podcast realm has kind of become this, but it's so, there's so many different segments and so many different flavors for people that you can really reach an audience that you think is there that you
Mhm.
might see a pretty good lift because it's easy to do. It's not intrusive, right? It's like,
But
hey,
we
you're
have
listening to
talked
our
about this
podcast.
before. Yeah. But we have talked about this before, and there is also a bullshit meter in that arena, which is like where you sort of have people who are not familiar with brands or products, right? And who are just sort of like Dorito salesmen, just like, just shilling for these brands or products versus like people who have a very topically niche podcast, right? And they're talking about they're sort of being sponsored by and promoting brands that they personally like use and are familiar with and are vouching in a way vouching for, right? There is a different level of impact for that latter versus just sort of like I'm going to take the sponsorship money and I'm just going to talk about any product that comes my way, right?
yeah,
Well,
no,
there's still standards and practices around this, at least in the US, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
can endorse a product you don't use.
Oh, of
At
course,
least you're
yeah,
not supposed to, right? Like that's been law for 70 years now. Going
right,
back to again Chevrolet.
yeah.
And I want to say it was a Bob Hope.
But the
I'm
problem is if
really
somebody gives you the
misrepresenting this,
product,
but
if you drove it once, right, or if somebody like sends you a tube of toothpaste and you brush your teeth with it one time, that
in
is so full of loopholes, right? Like,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but I think there's a good like you bring up a good point, Daoud, like the BS meter, right?
yeah.
Like are on those podcasts that you listen to, and this actually I think bridges into another emerging trend, right? Those people are it's real. If it's not AI driven, it's not something fake, right? Like okay, this is a real person. I like listening to them if they're willing to take this on as a sponsor, I assume that there's probably some quality or relevance to me that I'm willing to go through. And it's not cookie driven, right? It might be once you go through the site experience, right? But it's like go to .com/podcast, whatever, and get your free discount or your first 10% off, right? So there's an introductory offer. We've talked about this. This is really good for brands. So it kind of checks a lot, but it feels old school to me, right? Like, and I appreciate it actually. It's like I've definitely been swayed, like, yeah,
Oh,
I'll
100%,
go
yeah.
take a look at a product.
100%, yeah.
There's a hockey podcast that I listen to, and they're sponsored, and they have an affiliation with this group called State and Liberty, and they make these like really nice suits that are stretch. I went and bought a couple. Found out I need to get one that's like bespoke. I was in between sizes, but I
Oh,
definitely
that happens.
bought, and I spent a decent amount to see the product. Like it was worth it. But like,
Yeah.
is there anything like generationally that you guys see in those? Like, is there a leeriness to that though, even now? Like, and does it differentiate between like someone who's a, let's just say like a pure influencer, so like an Instagram, TikTok, like I know that you are literally shilling, you don't like, versus maybe more of like a personality or someone who has some sort of infamy or like it's a little bit of more prestige in like celebrity status. Does that differentiate for you guys, or is that all equal?
I mean, as a Gen Z myself, I feel like I am wary of most things that get promoted these days. I mean, I've lived through NFTs and lived through some interesting rug pulls, and I've seen like people fall down for such obvious scams. Like a recent
Yeah.
one is like the Hack 2 coin, which like was an obvious rug pull, and we've seen this happen dozens of times. Like holy, like this is the most documented scam in the history of all
Yeah.
scams
Oh,
after
there's
Ponzi
a
schemes.
So
wasn't there like some crazy? I mean, yeah, it's definitely a Ponzi scheme, or well, so that's an interesting one because like I think in the last what 4 years, let's just say like it's like an average of one. Yeah, I guess I'm going to say this one shit coin a day that goes live that somebody like
Yeah,
it's there's some like really high percentage of it, right? Like
oh
people
yeah.
can stand up a coin, promote it, and then pull it.
Yeah.
And this has happened, you said over, I'd say over a dozen times with like real celebrity, right? Like
yeah.
or people that are
Right.
pretty high prestige, and yet there's no ramification for it. It's just like, well, don't buy stuff that's stupid, I guess, or
Right.
like
Yeah. No, that's
But people
interesting.
fall
I,
for
I
it.
will say, I guess just to tie this, I mean, in terms of we are definitely like 100% like this is like quantitative and qualitative. Both millennials and Gen Zers, like for sure, like product discovery, brand discovery, uh, and even purchase behaviors, like it is a 100% index is so much higher on social media platforms, TikTok in particular. Again, they have podcasts and influencers from a standpoint of, and even like YouTube videos, right? Like as sources of brand discovery and product discovery, it's not even a questionable trend. Like it's for sure a trend. Yeah. So everything you're describing rings true in a much broader sense, I would say, and it's interesting because like some of the Black Friday, Cyber Monday trending that we've been watching, we're seeing pretty strong indications that up and comer brands and products are also they're seeing a bit more like momentum and traction into the holiday season versus legacy brands. Even though some legacy brands are obviously up as well, but so that's pretty interesting, right? They clearly are some of those up and comers are clearly positioned to maybe not have as entrenched of um, advertising tactics, right? So they're I would say anecdotally anyway, they're probably leveraging some of these trend shifts, these generational shifts in sort of discovery and shopping behavior as well.
And
so is this
usually,
a good
like
time to
younger
shift into
generation, yeah, like younger generation prefers the new brands because they feel like, hey, they're young, we're young, they're exciting, we're exciting. I'm not gonna buy like a brand that has been around for a while because I don't think they're doing anything exciting. I mean, a new kid, let's say a new like Gen Z like myself, if I live in the US, would I buy like a Ford F-150 or a Tesla? I'm most likely to buy a Tesla just for the technique, like it being more technically su superb. It's better and like it's more my age and my style, and it's more youth than like an F-150, which like it's a pickup truck,
Is
so it's for men. But when you look at the generations that are the buying powerhouse now, they're much younger and their preferences is not in big shiny stuff. Like, I mean, look at Vespas and
this
a
this is
pickup
interesting though.
trucks.
So, well, okay, so differentiation of like emerging brands, right? And I see this like, but then you have trend and designer. And I
Yeah,
know that like younger generations, like in that buying power, like they will still spend money on like Chanel's not going anywhere.
no.
Gucci, like everybody wants a Gucci belt still or a Hermes belt, right? Like there's these like weird design staples then. So you say like, yeah, I don't trust those brands, but then you're going to like these fashion houses, right? Like, and I'll give $1,000, to a brand like that. So it's not consistent across every
No,
segment,
it's
right?
not.
It's like, so
But there's
fashion,
also when you start talking like Gucci belt or Chanel, like right, like you're also talking about segment. Like there's two things. One, there are people who like right they either have lots of money but they only buy they buy selectively and they buy what they consider to be fine things, right? You also have people who that's like an aspirational, but like right, they might never be able to afford like an Hermes like bag, but they might buy a Hermes like scarf, right, or a whatever, right? But there is also a segment of like people who like will never buy a luxury brand no matter what. Or like you have somebody like me, I'm happy to spend really good money on something that I really want that's of high quality. It will never be like a product with like logos and branding all over it. It will be something like a clothing, like a suit that I really like, just happen to like that like maker, or like a pair of shoes I really like, or something that are really well made, or outdoor product for some activity I do, right? But so it's not the money that dissuades me. I'm just not like a brand guy. I just don't want like things with like logos all over it, right? Like, so
does
there's
that,
definitely a segmentation within those behaviors.
I would agree. I think there's
Yeah.
also something to prestige of wearing a label,
Hmm.
like going into like consumer psychology, right? Prestige of wearing a label when you're
Oh,
younger, right?
100%.
Like,
Yeah,
like,
100%.
oh, I have to be in this brand or that brand, like or I'm not cool. And then you look at it years later and you're like, that brand wasn't like it's okay quality. I don't know if I'd spend $200 on a hoodie. Like
Right.
Supreme does a really good job with this, right? That's actually a really
Yeah.
interesting study, right? Supreme has a really interesting cult following almost. And it's like they'll do a drop. People gotta go get it. I think it's about $200 for a hoodie, and then you got your secondary market where it's up to 500. Then there's people that do the knockoffs and yada, yada, yada. But it's a skate brand. Like
Yeah, yeah.
in its most pure essence, it's actually like it started as this like anti-establishment kind of mentality of
Right,
like we're
right,
just a
right,
basic
right.
clothing brand, but then like that became something. And so there's also
Sure.
the evolution of like something could be, starting as like, nope, just trying to be a good label. We're just trying to
Yep.
make clothing that we think our people will like. And
Yeah.
sometimes that evolves. And then the other side of it, I think, so that has some sort of prestige that comes with it. Then over
Yeah.
time, then you get these brands where it's like, nah, we don't need the other thing that really comes to mind in trend is like True Religion and Rock and Republic, right? Like those jean brands, denim brands, I should say, and like clothing brands. 15 years ago, really high prestige, right? Like you got to have a pair of True Religions, and they were nice jeans, like they were comfy and well made. Not many people are wearing them anymore because most people don't want to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
advertising the brand that they're wearing on both their butt cheeks. Like, like, and I don't know
Right.
if that, like, so that's the kind of the
Yeah.
pushback that comes with it. And like, oh, I just want good denim. Although now you see like
Yeah.
younger generations are coming back, like Jinkos are back. I'm
Yeah.
around, 15 and 16-year-old kids coaching hockey. And I like the amount of guys I see wearing, I'm like, we had those when I was young. And
Right.
you guys haven't figured out if it's raining, that's soaking right up. Your legs are wet. You are miserable. Nobody, but they don't like. So it's just weird because then there's these cylindrical pieces of well, circular, I should say, not cylindrical, of fashion trend, but the buying pattern, right? So I find it really interesting. I think there's like it really is like I don't want to say like a mature brain versus non because
No, that's
this
a
group
big
is,
deal. No, I think there is something to that for sure.
well, I was going to say this group's not very mature for our age difference. So let's be fair to that. But
No, but
yeah,
we can
I feel like there is
recognize,
something.
but there are
Yeah.
brands that get once you truly establish a brand, it is much it is durable through trends, right? Like until you like shit the bed and
Yes.
ruin the brand, right? Like whereas like trend, like certain gene, like a certain name label of gene, can have a huge uptick from a trend standpoint, but never really become established as a brand per se, right? Like, but similarly, like some have, right? Like, I don't think Lucky brand jeans are as popular as they once were, but it's a very successful and established brand. They
Yeah,
have,
they
yeah,
have their market
yeah,
fit perfectly.
yeah,
Like they know what
yeah,
they sell. It's
yep,
consistent. It's not overly gauche
right,
or gauche, I should say, or like it's pretty approachable, right?
yeah,
Like yeah, there's definitely I think more of like some of the and this is like a brand building thing. We've kind of strayed from some of our recap, but I think this is a really
yeah,
interesting conversation. Brand building. I've been doing like a lot of research on this and just looking at like and I think we were talking about this with someone not too long ago. Like Amazon doesn't sell the lowest price, although it does. Amazon's real their brand differentiator is convenience. You need something
convenience,
there
quick,
tomorrow.
quick, yeah, convenience, speed, whatever, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
sure,
So when you start looking at like brand building, say Amazon, like from a retail and e-commerce standpoint, that's what they're promising. Then you look at other shops, right? Like Nordstrom. I use this as a case study a lot. It's mostly true still. It's like it's quality, like they the way they source their product, thoughtfulness, but also can like theirs is a commitment to the customer, right? Like
yeah,
the
for
whole
sure, yeah,
story is always going to be in any business school you go to, any like when they bring that up, it's you can return anything
yeah.
in theory, right?
No, no,
So
of course, yeah,
there's
within reason, yeah, yeah.
so brand building and then you start to get into like I look at a lot of athleisure wear, right? Like Lululemon is huge.
Oh yeah,
Huge. Yep.
That is, and their zeitgeist or not zeitgeist, I should say, but their mantra really is like live in motion. It's like this:
yeah.
you can be a professional and you can still wear athleisure wear.
Yeah,
Mm.
and for as expensive as they are, their products. I mean, I always say like, don't talk to me about like modeling data, or don't talk to me about doing testing if you don't have a product or service worth owning, right, or paying for. And I mean, I will say because my wife owns some Lululemon stuff. I mean, it is quality
It
made
lasts.
product. It lasts a long time. It is expensive, but it also, it's not the same thing as a cheap pair of yoga pants you like buy from TJ Maxx. Like it's not. They're not. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's so trend. Yeah, fashion may be there, but like yeah, quality of product. All things that I guess going back to the origin of this part of our conversation, though, how much does that impact the buying behavior of like you and your friends and maybe we're really probably going into like younger generations like the what is it alpha now, right? Like
Yeah.
do they care about that quality because they're going to run through that trend so quickly, and this is why like Zara, H&M and some of these like quick trend fashion houses can spin out what they do. Doesn't matter as much until like I said, maybe it's a generational thing of like I don't really care that people think I'm wearing or know that I'm wearing my Lululemon shirt from 8 years ago because it still fits, it's still good, and it's the same as when I bought it.
Right.
How much does that impact it?
I mean, it differs. Like it differs because generally talking, men are more likely to stick with what we wear for a long time. And like I still have some of my jackets that I wore when I was in high school. They fit and they look
Hmm.
good.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna throw them out.
That's
So I think it like fast fashion has its place and it's here to stay, unfortunately, for a while. But I feel like people are now, especially with inflation happening and less money being thrown out in people's faces, especially after COVID. Like within COVID, you had like stimulus in the US. People had a lot of money running through their hands, but now it's a little bit on the tighter kind of like end of spectrum. People don't have a lot of money to throw around, but they will happily support a creator that they like or a brand that they like.
Yeah.
And I feel like the creator economy has grown massively in the past 5 years, 10 years. Brands that started from influencers like Kylie Jenner, Fenty Beauty by Rihanna, Uniqlo by what was it? The tennis player. I forgot his name. Um, I
Yeah, I know who. Yeah, I
yeah,
know who
I don't
you're
know.
thinking
I'll
of.
look it up while you guys
yeah.
talk.
Um, so a lot of
Well,
like
not creator necessarily, but like a certain level of like
influencer.
prestige. They have influence. Yeah, if we were actually to say like what a pure influencer, they have influence to move a product, and they happen to be good at brand building because it's their
Yeah.
product.
And then
That's
you
like
have
I
the
think that's a really
creator,
key piece there, right? Like
but you also
it's
have the
your
creator
product.
economy.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so and then but they like Kylie Jenner's a really good one, right? She lives in kind of like all of the worlds, right? She has
Yeah.
influence because she has celebrity. Um, her brands do very well. Um, like people have there's a level of prestige around like her, who she is.
Yeah.
But there's also like people think there's a level of authenticity with her as
Yeah.
well.
So those will be interesting. Those will be interesting test cases when we are like sitting in our rocking chairs 20 years from now, right? It'll be interesting. It'll sort of be interesting to see how this morphs where let's say the creators and influencers and founders who are seeing success right now because of these near-term trends, like which in 20 years from now will have morphed into like truly established successful brands, right? That'll be interesting to see. But you can't deny that right now it has been a huge opportunity for new and emerging brands for sure. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
Definitely.
No.
And
Well,
I
I
wanna
think
take
this.
go for it.
Go ahead. No,
No, I'm gonna switch
no.
it a little bit.
Well, I was gonna say I think this tees up our Black Friday recap pretty well.
Yeah,
If is that were we on the same wavelength there?
slightly.
All right.
Go
Well,
for
say
it.
Slightly.
what. Yeah. Go
Throw it
for it,
out there.
Daoud, and then yeah.
No, I was gonna switch it to something a little bit before, like it's gonna segue to the Black Friday because uh, I was just seeing some posts by Khalid Saleh, who I've had the pleasure of working with because I worked at Figpa in 2022, and like Black Friday, Cyber Monday were amazing times to pull some data and just get some really exciting insights that I feel like no one else other than the companies themselves had access to. And we had access to a lot of data that we were able to analyze and then say, okay, so this looks like the new trend, and this looks like this is gonna be dying soon. And that's how they like kept on improving, and like this is how you catch trends. It's by A/B testing them. But speaking of Khalid, I was gonna say that I've read somewhere that 2025 in the tech scene especially will be dominated by founder first initiatives and startups. I've seen, and this ties to the creator community, also like people who showcase what they're building and showcase their expertise and like being open to what they were gonna be doing. That sells in tech industry, that sells in e-commerce industry, that sells in Black Friday, that like Cyber Monday. It sells everywhere. Founder first is gonna be huge in 2025, and that's like it was driven by the creator economy and like YouTube, podcasts, and stuff like that. But now in tech, it's such a like a big push for people to move away from like third party cookies and third party companies and being faceless corporations to being, hey, that's the face of the brand, that's the founder of the brand, that's the person I know I should be talking to. And I feel like this has been going for like a while now. And Black Friday, Cyber Monday is one of the times that I've seen the founder first, data that is coming out by like Fikby and Invest and Khalid, and he's sharing some stuff. I'm like, oh, I recognize why would people trust you to work on their massive like websites and stuff like that. It's because like he does not have an issue showcasing like the things that he's working on and like the stats that he's working on. And I feel like this is gonna be the driving force for everyone and everything when it comes to tech, because I can sell a big platform like Salesforce, and people will still think this is a faceless corporation, but they might go with a smaller vendor for a like loyalty programs from a brand like, let's say, Gamble, who is like a brand that I've been following for a while now, and they're like good people. I've interviewed their CEO before, and what like their CEO said such an important piece of information, that lots of the business that comes to the company comes from his own LinkedIn and his sharing of stuff. So it's interesting where this trend goes from here.
That is interesting. I think it, from a tech standpoint, it ties in with some of the shifts we're seeing around composability. Like it is becoming more and more possible to truly integrate like best in breed agnostic sets of tools if you're willing to invest in the kind of front end piece of that's required to do so effectively. But I also think that prediction aligns with what we're seeing on the kind of AI, Gen AI front as well, right? We're seeing like this year, you saw the emergence and growth of users on obviously like things like ChatGPT, but a lot of the adoption of Gen AI this year has been in embedded functionality, right? Embedded agents, embedded bots within legacy tool sets. But we're actually sort of seeing in the tail end of this year and certainly into 2025, we're going to see a huge explosion in more native AI first up and comer applications, right? Like we're starting to see the emergence of like AI first CRM systems, right? So not AI tacked onto a legacy system, for example. So, and we're gonna just see an increasing proliferation of that. So I think that aligns with what you're saying from a kind of a founder first mentality as well. There's going to be a whole bunch of ankle biter companies. I think if you look at Scott Brinker and for instance their state of MarTech report, you can just see like, right, everybody's been talking about like consolidation in ad tech and MarTech for years. Well, yes, in certain sectors consolidation is happening, but on net, there was a huge explosion in new MarTech platforms this year, and most of the AI.
I think this is really interesting from what we were talking about a few minutes ago, and this makes me think of I think it's from the movie like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, but it's that quote of like, when legend becomes fact, print the legend. And this goes back to Daoud, what you were saying about brands, and you're like, well, would I get a Ford or would I get a Tesla? And the prestige of like, let's be real about, we can do a whole podcast on him, but Elon Musk and what is like fact versus what has become the legend of Elon Musk, of his ability as a founder. I'm not arguing he's a brilliant guy. Obviously, he's done some things right, because you're not the richest man in the world if you don't, but there's also probably a lot of things that we don't know how he got to that we'll never know. And there's stuff that we do know that you're like, that's not quite how everybody sees it.
Yeah.
And so there's like, I think this is an interesting piece when you're talking about tech. Like people attach themselves to Tesla because there's the idea that like he's a pioneer. And right, going back to the brand positioning, Tesla is his, even though it wasn't started by him, right? And Tesla sells the future. Back to that brand positioning. Tesla is not a car company; it's the future.
Right.
That's all. And so everything he pushes is, well, yeah, I want everything to look like Blade Runner 2049 because that's what I'm selling. Right. But it's interesting that you talk about this in tech, right? Like who else is like positioning themselves within tech to be somebody with that level of influence for their product, their capability, whatever it is, to become something like this. I think that's really interesting that like you pointed that out. Like, would I buy a Tesla or a Ford? And like that, this is a great example of it. And it's his influence. And I wouldn't call him an influencer. I mean, he is. I mean, he controls.
Well, yeah, he is in a way. Yeah, for sure.
He controls one of the largest social media companies now.
Right. I'd still buy the Ford, which is funny, right? Like I wouldn't.
I'm probably with you on that, but
I probably wouldn't buy the Ford either. But if I was choosing between a Ford and a Tesla, I would buy a Ford for sure.
Well, let's talk about some industry things happening too. I do want to get to Black Friday, Cyber Monday as well. We did say we were going to segue into that, but I wanted to talk about like just in our industry, there's been some freaking just in the last several days, big news on the sort of digital advertising front and Holdco front. IPG Omnicom merger, $13 billion deal. Looks like that's going to go through. That's a huge shift. These are two of the biggest proponents of principal based media buying, which is like one of the biggest like forms of media arbitrage happening today. So where agencies actually buy media inventory in bulk and then mark it up very heavily and sell it to their clients like at like 60, 70, 80% margins, profit margins in many cases, and take their media their agency fees oftentimes on top of that, right? So anyway, I guess I leave it to advertisers to decide for themselves what they think of that, but it is a huge change. The things that it's likely to shake up in our industry would be obviously these two gigantic players in the digital agency space. Like these companies combined are the agency of record for many clients, right? So and they also have a really outsized influence on ad tech, right? So these two big companies are not going to maintain their same tech stacks intact, right? So where the case where they have overlapping licenses for the same DSP or ad server, like they're going to either consolidate to one platform or they're going to consolidate their licenses at some point. They're going to do all kinds of things, right? But does it also play into this sort of consolidation, starts to lean into oligopoly, monopoly, territory as well, like, right, fewer players, there's less competition. So it's definitely a big announcement. Who knows how it'll play out in reality in terms of the impact on the industry, but some of these things we can sort of say, yeah, likely to happen. Big shift. I just saw a dog nose.
We have a special guest, hanging out with us for the
Nice.
second half of the podcast here.
Awesome.
No, I think you're dead on with that. It's the media world is continuing to move into these conglomerate, like you talk about, like this is specific to media buying, but like print media, like we've seen this kind of merging and consolidation happening, consistently the last 15, 20 years.
Mm.
There is hope in some ways, because then you look at like, well, emerging brands going back to, this is very thematic. I actually really like these throughputs now. You look at the emerging brands from influencers and like basically becoming their own media companies in some way, right? Like I think Barstool Sports is an interesting one, right? When you look at a group that has made itself into a worth over $1 billion in
Right.
its ability to advertise and offer media in comparison to the likes of like more established like ESPN, right?
Yep.
And they're
Yeah.
like a lot of people would argue they're in direct competition
Oh, they are.
all the way through.
They definitely are. Yeah.
And the medium's different, right? It's not like Barstool's got a channel on cable,
Right.
but we know more people
Yep.
watch YouTube than ever. Like they're getting their media, they're getting their sports in different ways. So I think it's really interesting.
For sure. They are.
So like,
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Yeah, like these, you're going to get, consolidation, conglomerates kind of emerging. So this merger is a great example of it. There will be other people that find other ways to advertise and emerging players, because there's always something that's not being addressed. And so
That's true. Although I will say, just as a counterpoint, not that what you're saying isn't right, but just other, like industry wise, right? This was the year we were projected the big five to top $1 trillion in global advertising spend, and you ahead of this call, I think you confirmed it was 1.04 trillion for the big five.
yeah, that was Group M's projection. It looks like it's going to hit right about there, which would be just under a 10% increase. So congratulations. Okay. We spend money on media. If you are wondering why your ad budgets went up, there you go.
Anyhow,
that'll drive ad budget up. But it's another one where it's like, going back to what Daoud said, like, okay, well then where am I going to find these emerging creators and podcasts and like, let's get creative where people are spending their time. Where's my customer? And again, the data is not going to tell you all of this outright. Some of it's going to be based on being a really intuitive marketer who understands psychology and where I can meet my people at. So
It's
there's always
also focusing on impact, right? As well, right? Like just because there's $1 trillion in ad spend in the big five, collectively, there's probably another 35% of advertising spend that's happening on the open web, right? And which is a lot of money, right? And there's also like being smart, like you just said, Sean, right? Like knowing where your customers or your likely customers, where do they spend their time online? What content do they consume? What people do they follow? You can much more efficiently and effectively reach your desired customers than you think you can by paying attention, like using cool tools like audience research tools like SparkToro, right? Rand Fishkin's venture. It's a great tool where you can actually not only find out like what search terms do people use on Google, right? Which is useful.
Who are the influencers who actually speak to this?
What content do they consume? Where do they spend their time and attention, right? Like,
I want to cue in on something you said there. You said online. I would argue even offline has more.
Of course, yeah.
Daoud, again, when we talk about kind of the year-end recap, and we know Black Friday, Cyber Monday is where most of the retailers make up whatever deficits they have throughout the year. So a lot of that is online driven. But I would argue people are hungrier, and I would love Daoud's input on this. I think people are hungrier for more brand activation, offline, community-driven events by these brands more than they've ever been. I've seen it multiple times this year where a brand does a pop-up or an activation and it sells out. In golf, like Malbon does this a lot. They have like a whole club that's built around NFTs that wasn't a shill. It's a really cool program, but they do like exclusive golf tournaments and community building, and like they give them exclusive access to product drops. I saw this with over the summer. I saw this at the US, or was it last summer? Oh my gosh, this is bad. No, this summer, US track and field, Brooks Shoes. Did an amazing activation. They took over basically like this bar, called it Hyperion House, and they did like they had like autograph sessions. They did a podcast at at an adjacent property with two of their like biggest stars. And then they did a run. So they did like this group run. And I think it was hundreds of people that showed up for this thing. So for as much as we see the online impact, like again, I actually really like this. People are being challenged to think creatively about what their brand is, what it stands for, how they engage with people more than they've ever been. Just because we have more reach and we have more ways to target, let's really think about how we're targeting people and what does that really mean?
Yeah, totally. Right. If you're an online sports, seller, right? Like freaking sponsor some little league teams in your region or something, right? Like even though you're an e-commerce company, nothing's preventing you from, like you said, nothing's preventing you from finding people where they do their activities offline, right? Like there's a ton of opportunity there. I think you're spot on with that. Like that's where people's attention is. Yeah.
Yeah. I think as much time as we spend online, there are people who are hungry for a non-digital experience.
100%.
Now, whether they want to like then digitize that and like get a selfie and like, oh, look at, but that's part of it. But at least they're interacting. Like I think we're at an interesting place. Like I almost think we're at a threshold of like, is everything digital good for us? We know psychologically it's not. There's, enough data out there to support that. Yeah. So how as a brand are you going and engaging folks in IRL, I believe is the proper term.
In real life, yeah. Which is terrible. Like the fact that you even have to say in real life when you just mean like you were in person doing something actual, that's just terrible. But yeah, no, I mean, I've been on the B2B side, right? Like, I mean, I'm not going to give away like our secret sales tactics, if I'm going to throw up in my mouth here, but our secret sauce. But we have, wait for it, we have success with events where you talk to people in person and you share food and maybe coffee and a drink or something, right? Big shocker there. That is helpful in closing deals and winning opportunities. Shocker! I know we just shot ourselves in the foot releasing
Yeah,
that.
I know it's out now.
Um, and we are a digital, our company largely focuses on digital of one kind or another. But yeah, but shocker that meeting people face to face and talking about things that matter would be beneficial to the sales process. All right, let's talk about something interesting. BFCM, what was the performance? I know I just used an acronym or an abbreviation and I didn't spell it out first, so I have to pay into the swear jar. But so Black Friday, Cyber Monday timeframe, how's 2024 shaking up compared to last year?
So if we're going year over year, it looks like Black Friday. Early reports are saying about 10.8 billion, 11 billion, 10 to 11 billion. So about a 10% increase year over year.
Okay.
Some sources are reporting mobile accounted for over 50% of that, which shouldn't be a shocker to us, right? Although I'm like you guys, like if I'm making a big purchase, I still go to well, not like you guys, I should say, but I'm going to get dinged as a millennial for sure, because it's like, oh, you're going to your desktop to make a big purchase. I actually don't buy anything on Black Friday. I hate it. I cleanse that day, if you will. Interesting enough. So increase in online, shocker. Foot traffic decreased. They're estimating about 3 to 4%. And they're saying, AI has kind of enhanced some of this. Some brands were playing around with that this year, trying to enhance their experiences. Probably more from that bot assistant type experience. There's something I want to talk about a little bit later in regards to AI, more on the generative AI and going back into our advertising talk. And then Cyber Monday, about 13 billion. So
that's what I'm seeing as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is plus 7, which isn't bad.
7-8%. Yeah.
Because the first part of November was kind of not for everybody, but for a lot of brands that I'm directly involved with, the first part of November was really tough with all the election uncertainty. But really kind of seems like once it got past sort of a very divisive U.S. election, that seems to second half of November and into December seems to have loosened up a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're spending more money. I don't know if people have it actually.
Yeah, that's a different question. Yeah.
Yeah. And this might be inflationary too. So like the actual value of what was spent, if you take out inflation, probably flat, but more people spending money. A lot of the things we just talked about, the behaviors, I think it's pretty easy to cue in on why. But it'll be interesting
CPG,
to see.
Yeah. CPG and groceries, like people have been defecting, since really that big inflationary upturn, when people kind of felt like, this combination of like supply chain shit and also like just pure flat out price gouging, like there actually has been a fair amount of defection away from like legacy brands to store brands, for example. People have become more price sensitive about food products that they buy regularly, right? It'll be interesting to see if that sort of, and we also, like you mentioned Khaled earlier, Daoud, and he's published some initial holiday findings that really up and coming brands have actually fared better in terms of growth this year compared to legacy brands, right? So there is a kind of you might say that the general milieu is a kind of brand defection kind of mindset right now, at least for some segments of consumers. People are willing to go from, the Kraft mac and cheese to the Kroger brand mac and cheese pretty easily, even for things like, that are kind of commodities, right? Like, and then also like where you're actually talking about where brand matters, it seems to also be. So that's a really interesting trend. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out in 2025 as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked a lot about the influences of how this probably got here. It'll, as everybody starts to reconcile their Q4s, we'll have validity against some of these. Again, a lot of this is more approximate than it is, actual.
Yep. Let me touch on two things, and then I want to hear the AI. We can wrap up on AI trends. On the legal and regulatory front, we did have this year the Colorado Artificial Intelligence Act. Again, it puts some burdens on you if you use AI, especially if it's like in certain kind of sensitive industries, right? If you're doing health insurance, if you're going to try and make decisions about, approving or denying healthcare, if you're going to be insurance, right? Things that really do matter to people's well-being, right? There is some legal burden within the state of Colorado. I suspect we'll have something in other states following along. And then also there was the EU's Digital Markets Act, and again that does put some pretty significant burdens on some of these large, some of these kind of anchor platforms, right? It doesn't necessarily put a lot of onus directly on like small mom and pop advertisers, but it did put a bunch of new constraints in the realm of like these large. I mean, kind of if you think about the big five, these are the types of players that the Digital Markets Act, largely affected. But it also does relate to privacy and consent for general, digital businesses as well. One of our colleagues, Holger, they have a write up on it on our blog. Be worth checking that out because it does have regulatory implications. But yeah, let's jump back to the kind of whole AI, like specifically generative AI, but also, kind of some of the things we're seeing in terms of like embedded AI versus native AI. It's all these different things. Like, let's try to recap what we saw in 2024 and think we might see in 2025.
I mean, the first one that's probably the hottest topic right now has been the Coca-Cola ads. So going back on the CPG front, everybody knows Coca-Cola at Christmas usually has some sort of big push, whether it's the polar bears or, Santa smiling, having a Coke. But this year they released creative that, from what everybody's kind of dissected at this point across the industry, was fully Gen AI. Mm-hmm. So that was, and I want to make sure for those so we're not talking about people generated via AI. So you go in, hey, I want to build a 30-second commercial. Can you generate the creatives for me to have this commercial? And it appears as though this whole commercial, or like 90% of it, is AI built. And you can tell because like some of the trucks don't look the same. There's some like weird, the uncanny valley kind of exists on a few things still.
And has this, just out of curiosity, has Coca-Cola Company, like have they confirmed this, or is this just, or has their creative agency confirmed this, or is that just like basically what the experts in our industry think based on the quality and nature of the creative? Just out of curiosity.
They have said that it's it's part of their holidays are coming. I think they called it like Silver Santa. Okay. But yeah, it's definitely an AI generated campaign. Yeah, so they Coca-Cola's come out and said, yeah, we used AI in this. They're not the first ones to do it this year, and I know more brands are going to be doing this. There's some really interesting products that are facilitating this that I actually like, and like Photoshop's doing this, right? Like Adobe's integrated a whole AI capability into their creative layer. There's some others out there that are kind of emerging more on like the written text side, copy and capabilities there.
Let's pause on that for a second. Guardrails for this type of stuff. Starting at the top, Daoud, what guardrails do you see needed? Gen AI advertising creative. What makes it persuasive and valuable, and what makes it sort of manipulative and deceptive?
I mean, it's tricky now because is it like it's based on people's work? So is it really like is it ethical? Is it like is AI gonna just steal people's lifelong like livelihood and like it's like what Sean said, it's uncanny valley. It opens up a can of worms that I don't think anyone is ready for as of yet. It's good for producing cheap and fast like content, and like when it gets good, it's gonna revolutionize some of the the media that we see, we're gonna be seeing some interesting ads, interesting movies. We're gonna be seeing some weird stuff coming out. But from what I see right now, the big companies that really do not need to save on bucks, they are the ones who are pushing to
Yeah.
push this like AI into everyone's like faces. And I don't
Yeah.
think it's really, I mean, I do believe in the benefit of using AI. I just don't believe like in a company like Coca-Cola using AI, to be honest. They are too
Yeah, like you
big.
guys
Okay.
didn't have
But
the time or the runway to put together creative for an ad that you guys have literally run. You've had the same four creatives for holiday season for the last
Yeah.
30 years.
so you're focused on the production side, which I get. I mean, there is a real economic and labor issue here, and I don't. I actually agree with you. It's a huge issue. Like one, just those LLMs themselves are built on the backs of data workers. Like none of that data work, and most of those people are very underpaid. It's very low. So anyway, that let's leave that aside for a second. On the advertising side, the output. Do you feel like what do you feel like the guidelines need to be from the standpoint of just the output? So your average consumer seeing these things, you know, isn't necessarily manipulated or deceived by what they're seeing. Do you feel like there need to be any guidelines around that?
Yeah. Do not like over promise, under deliver. Like false advertising will be like the hammer of false advertising should be like swinging left and right, because I think with AI people are gonna be like advertising their product like it's the holy grail. It's the only thing that you need in your life. And I feel like people would be susceptible to like falling under like the spell and charm of
Hmm.
good produced AI
Yeah.
videos that, when you get the product itself, it's like, what the fuck is this shit? And
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the ad, it looks like it's made in heaven, and then when you get it, it's wow, it's made in a sweatshop. Like, dear Lord.
Sean, what about you? What do you think? Guidelines, guardrails, whether or not they should be legal or regulatory, that's a different question. But just from an industry, what we should be putting in place. Do you feel like there need to be any?
I I anticipate there will be at some point some sort of a union or body that will probably lobby for creatives to, if you're going to use generative AI creative, like you need to disclose that somehow.
Mm.
Um, I think something like that probably emerges at some point,
Hmm.
especially because like Daoud said, like a lot of the models, especially if you're putting people in these, right? The
Hmm.
model's coming from somewhere. It's a trained model off something. So,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
we see this on social a lot. Like people will take kind of creative liberties. There's been some really interesting stuff, non-advertising specific, but like if Harry Potter was, done by like a fashion house and it or like Balenciaga, I think that one was really, they do those, or like if the Avengers was in the 80s. And so you're training these data off like known entities, right? So
Right.
there's probably going to be protection of likeness there. We had this with deepfake a couple years ago, and that's still kind of in question, how that technology should be used. You see like from a creative standpoint, I don't know if it's been heavily used in advertising to de-age people, but I know like Disney uses this a lot with
Mm,
actors now. I think
Yeah.
Indiana Jones, they used it. They used it in
yeah.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
Um, like there's interesting application for it. I think they're going to have to disclose how they use it or when it's being used. And I think there will be, like, you have all these unions for other things, or some sort of governing body, or at least watch group. I think there
Yeah.
probably at some point is somebody who emerges in that to help
Right.
kind of steer some of this. Cause like for me, like we've all worked with a lot of creative, Daoud, you're on the creative side.
Mm.
Um, we've all worked with a lot of creatives. Like people work hard to come up with concepts and to put together these things. And
Totally.
so as a tool to help them, if great, but like there's a whole world of people that no matter how good AI gets, there's creative people that I've worked with where I'm like, your process is great. Like, and so
And what
it
about on
would
the
be,
other end of it? What about on the consumer end of it? What they are seeing of the outputs? Are there guardrails needed in terms of how that Gen AI creative persuades or manipulates them? Do you feel like?
I think, I mean, disclosure again is going to be one, just like we do with any paid placement, anything like that. I think disclosure is going to be big for consumers.
Mhm.
Um, ultimately, I think consumers are smart enough to know when they hit an uncanny valley or they see it. Like this is
Yeah.
going back to Coke. Part of the backlash of this is that a lot of people said like it feels soulless. It doesn't feel,
Mhm.
even though it's the branding's there,
Yeah.
there's creative elements.
Oh, a lot of
It
AI
doesn't.
writing feels like that too. It's soulless, right? And it's starting. You can actually see like SEOs are saying like never use like in the ever evolving landscape of this, right? Like because the fucking AI like will like 9 times out of 10, like if you tell it like write me something about the change like the evolving right, it's coming up with the same language over and over again, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's
this
got
sort of
these weird like
soul,
consistent prompts or scripts. Again, it's trained to sound a certain way.
yeah,
And so like, but if you're good at AI engineering, right, and you say, well, write this as if, and then you
avoid
give it a
these,
prompt.
right? Yeah, of course, of course.
So there's ways around that, but this is one thing I saw. I think this was like a month ago or so now. Like Ben Affleck was talking at like a CNBC event about this as well, and talking about its use in film. Um, and him talking about like I don't think it can replace like some labor intensive tasks in there, and he was really skeptical of like you're never really going to be able to replace like the nuance that humans understand emotionally or like or like that level of script writing. It will help make things easier, more readily,
Right,
producible. And that's I
right.
think that's an okay use if everybody's aligned on what that's going to be used for or how it's going to be used. Um, but
Yeah.
like I've heard some people talking about like eventually you'll be able to like go and do an on demand, like you want to watch a Friends episode that you've never had before and you just want to go create it and it'll spit out an
Right.
episode for you. Like
Yeah.
there are some things there that like I think it's just it's interesting like until we see how this actually plays out,
Right.
right? Like I was going to say it's like fan fiction, but like that's really what like if I want to see
But
an
some
episode
stuff
of
makes sense, right? Like some stuff makes sense, right? Like if I like this, if I'm selling plastic cups online, right, and I take a picture of my like cup like this, oh my god, this is the most bitchin' plastic cup you could ever buy. But I have it in 58 different colors, like using Gen AI to sort of swap out the cup color as long as it's the actual colors variations. I don't
yep.
really have an issue with that because the
It
the
saves a
creative
designer time.
the creative output is also like it matches plausibly to what that user's product experience is going to be or whatever, right? Like I kind of see that makes sense. Or like if you
Now,
want to
when you're
create,
holding that cup and you have 6 or 7 fingers,
yeah.
that's a
Or
problem.
yeah, right. I mean, so I think like some of the like just sort of like truth in advertising, and you mentioned that earlier, Daoud. Like some of the standards we need people to maintain, they just need to maintain them more clearly than ever, which is you need to be representing your products and services in ways that are plausible IRL in real life. Like you cannot like exact right. Everybody knows they freaking airbrush like ice cubes in a cup of Jack Daniels in a print ad but it still looks like ice and it still looks like whiskey. Like right, it's
We want an
not
ice cream sundae. That's not actually ice cream. It's whipped cream. Or, yeah, like
right. Yeah,
we've seen enough of these kind of behind the
yeah,
scenes tricks
but
now.
it still resembles roughly like like a Baskin Robbins ad. Like it's very glossy and pretty, but like it still roughly resembles what a banana split looks like or
So,
what a milkshake looks like, right? And like, um, so I think
I,
there's just people need to be more attentive than ever of the possible missteps of misrepresenting things to a degree that it truly becomes deceptive and manipulative. Like all advertising in a certain way is prone to this as it is, right? Because you think, like, we always think we're influencing people like this kind of like rational actor, like Adam Smith model, right? Like if you articulate clearly like the benefits you know, the benefit, the unique selling proposition of your product. Like a consumer can make a rational decision if they want to buy your product or not. But the fact of the matter is you have no idea. Is that person like a shopping addict? Is that person like buying your product going into massive credit card debt that they can't afford? Like, is this product like really fulfilling them psychologically and reason? Like, you have no idea. Actually, you're just like no
But
one
this is
person.
like a tale as old as time, bringing our
Yeah, yeah,
conversation
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
full circle, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
we are in a consumer economy,
yeah,
right? Even globally, for the most part,
yeah,
consumers will make decisions whether it's right or wrong, depending on
yeah.
like how susceptible to some of that advertising are they, and as a brand, what are you willing to expose your brand to maybe make a sale versus like long term sustainability?
Yeah,
I think we need to weigh that. I think that's ultimately the use of AI,
yeah,
whether it is for creative generation, AI driven assistance in e-commerce experiences or for customer service.
yeah,
Know what your limit is, right? Like that's another
yeah,
one. We didn't really talk about this, but like I would consider this part of a digital experience. If I'm going to go on a website and I need support and I got to go through an AI chatbot, when realistically, yeah, it's going to cost you $16 for a person to or whatever it is hourly to just answer a phone.
right.
Like what as a brand, what are you willing to give up?
Yeah. No, it goes
And
that
and
goes back to
ultimately,
that
will I
UX
leave your
question
brand or
too.
not?
Yeah. Yeah, I know it goes back to UX question. I think like I have real simple standards for me what I like and don't like. But like if I go on hotels.com and I can use their chatbot and I can literally say like cancel this reservation for me and it's an AI that goes, "Oh, your reservation's canceled. Here's your like confirmation or whatever."
Yep,
I'm kind of
done,
okay with that. But if I have a
seamless.
problem, but if I'm like, I want to talk to a person right now because I have a more serious problem, like I'm trying to check into the hotel and they're saying they don't have my reservation. Like I want the real experience immediately, right? And I don't want any friction to get there, right? Like so, yeah. I think you're right though. Yeah, there. That's a real question brands have to ask. Yeah.
Well, on that
Want to wrap it up?
uplifting, that did wrap it up quite nicely. There's a lot to look forward to and a lot to be weary of. Same tale
Absolutely.
as old as time.
What are
Yeah.
you guys looking forward to personally as we close out 2024 and looking forward to in 2025?
From an industry standpoint,
No, no, just in
or
person,
just
in your life. Yeah,
personally,
what are you hoping for to close out the year and to start the year?
I'll lead it off. My wife and I are going to go to New York during Christmas time. We have never done that together. I went a few years ago with my brother, many years ago. Say what you will about New York. It's still arguably the greatest city on earth. So
Oh, it's a
we're
hell
going
of
to
a fun
go.
place to spend a couple of days and to eat good food, to just to take
As,
in the energy.
yeah,
Oh yeah, it's gonna be
as
fun,
you and
man.
I know well, as another one of my favorite New York trips. But yeah, like I don't know. So yeah, we're looking forward to that before the end of the year. Kind of like that's our kind of our Christmas present to ourselves this year, an experience,
Awesome,
not consumer goods. No
cool, good for
offense to any
you.
brands out there, just I've got enough stuff. I want
Good for
memories.
you, man. Good for you. Cool, awesome. How about you, Doug? What are you looking forward to close out the year?
Well, hopefully I'll be traveling, maybe to Saudi Arabia in the couple of weeks of Christmas. After that, I'm looking to the company summit. The last summit was amazing. You, Patrick, attended. Sean is new, so he's gonna attend his first summit with us. So I'm very, very much looking out for our summit. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
that'll be a cool
hopefully
way to.
cook some videos because I have like 400 gigabytes of recording from the last summit. I'm gonna go through some of them, get some snippets, share on social media, hype things up. Definitely excited for the summit, to be honest, but I'm also excited for some time off, just visiting my dad, doing
Oh,
some
cool.
family stuff. Um, and AI. I'm excited about AI. I've been trying some. other models than ChatGPT, and I am impressed by Gwen. It's um it's Alibaba Cloud AI.
Oh,
It's
okay.
really good. It's really really good, and I'm excited to
Cool.
see like looks like China is gonna be such a huge player in this scene. It's no longer dominated by the US. Looks like China is coming in hot. First
Well,
EVs, now AI. Who knows? So that's exciting
What
to be
can't the
honest.
Chinese do better than us?
well,
Hockey. They cannot do
anyhow.
hockey better than you.
Yeah, no, it's they have a big population and they have a lot of investment in technology. It's interesting to
They
see what they're putting
definitely
out for
do.
sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What
Yeah,
are
I'm
you
going to take
excited
some
about?
time off. The we're going to shut down the U.S. office between Christmas and New Year's, which is awesome. Get some downtime. Um, my stepdaughters, they're coming up to visit. We're going to go to Boise for a few days before Christmas and go see my son. He just bought his first house, so that'll be cool. Um, go do some redneck stuff, maybe go shoot my gun, go shoot some guns and sight in my rifles and all that fun stuff that I like to do when I don't have anything else going on. And then yeah, for 2025, definitely the summit will be a lot of fun. It's always good to see everybody in person. That part of the world, the hospitality, the welcoming, the food, all of those traditions of welcoming strangers and friends from out of country, out of town. It's a really a special place to visit. So I'm looking forward to it. Yeah,
Definitely. Our guests, our rules.
that's right.
All right. So we'll see you next week. I think we have another episode for next week. I think we
Do we
do.
have something lined up? If not,
We'll
we'll
line something up.
reconvene soon enough.
We'll line
I
something
think
up.
Sooner than
we
later.
we definitely did our usual. We went down some rabbit holes today's guys, but I think they were useful topics. I was glad to hear your input, Daoud, today because there's a lot of just really interesting shifts happening in consumer behavior, and I think you have a lot of direct insights into what's happening. I think that was cool. Appreciate
Yeah.
hearing from you today more.
Well,
And Sean,
I'm
as
happy to help.
usual, it's always
Happy to
good.
swirl, man.
You know,
Tangential, never met her.
I feel like I feel like I owe you a beer of apology or something for.
No, no apology necessary. I love our tangential conversations.
All
That's
right,
as long as we bring them back around, and we did that more than enough today. So
perfect.
talking about wrapped, like wrapping paper, we went around the box more than enough times.
That's true. Yeah, we had some spare for sure. Well, cool guys.
Yeah. All right. We'll see ya.
Enjoy your
Bye.
days. Talk soon.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Bye
Bye.
bye.